Hello and welcome to episode 1 of an Untitled project. This is Steve from Gloucester. And let me first begin by saying there's nothing I could do with the voice. Nothing. I've tried, and nothing can change what's going on with the way I sound. Maybe there's a great producer out there that can fix it. Awesome. But for now, it is what it is. If you don't like the sound of my voice, shut it off. No problem. No big deal. If you leave a comment or make fun of me, I'm just going to delete it because there's really no need for the negativity out there. And 99% of the people who leave comments probably don't have the balls to hit the record button and state the way they feel, while hopefully bringing some clarity and entertainment. Now, what I first want to do is talk about my name being mentioned on the Kirk Minahan Show, Menners Live, and Mike and the Minifans. Obviously, whenever you hear your name mentioned, it's mind-blowing. And it stops you in your tracks, and it makes you want to follow up and talk about some of the things that you've heard, especially when you can't respond. And the problem is you want the main person, being Kirk Minahan, to hear what you have to say and hope that he can rationally understand and respond to you. And Kirk, as many people know, does not allow that. You go against the grain, you get made fun of. You say something he doesn't like, he yells at you. Or his standard is, I don't know, what do you want me to do about it? But what I want to do is just state how I feel and hope that something registers with Kirk to the point that he would follow up with me, and maybe we can have an offline conversation about it. Now, I have gone the right way. I did reach out to his producer, Jack Coleman. I have reached out to a few other people that have been on his show. And I've asked, hey, how can I get in touch with Kirk? How can I speak to him? And so far, I haven't been able to get that audience. Well, hopefully, I can get the audience now by stating a few things that I hope make sense. First, I'm a huge Kirk guy. Have listened to him since his WEEI days. We don't need to go through his resume. But I will say he is the best podcaster in America, if not the world. He's entertaining, funny, just really a good entertainer, and someone who I can relate to, as a lot of my personal life experiences completely match what he has going on in his personal life or had going on in his personal life. So when I see the way Kirk has gone through all those challenges in life and has really gone to this level, it's just out of this world impressive. I also enjoy the cast of characters on the show. I mean, Blind Mike, unbelievably funny, love him. Big Steve Robinson, Cullinane, Justin, the Barstool guys, and those people that come in every once in a while, like Mike Montante, and so forth, are just awesome. Awesome people, and they really help get you through each week. I mean, we all have family issues, things going on with your children, things going on with work, financial stuff. And the Kirk Minahan Show and all the other side shows are just a relief to the week. You know, it helps you shut your mind off from everything else and just focus and dedicate yourself on a show. And it's really a source of entertainment and a stress reliever. And that's things that a lot of people, always are looking for. Now, when it comes to his producers, let me first state that obviously, do I think anything myself or anybody on Twitter says is going to be taken to heart by Kirk? No. It's his show. He's on the masthead. It's the Kirk Minahan show. Whatever he says, he's going to do. Whatever he doesn't want to do, he's not going to do. But I really hope that Kirk would be honest and consistent with what he says. Now, do I think or actually want him to get rid of his producer, Andrew Augustus, a.k.a. Gus? No. Come on. It's a bit. We know I don't want anybody to be unemployed. But I wish Kirk would be upfront with a few things. First, when it came to the producer search, which, by the way, was unbelievably awesome, he had stated, I want a single guy who is going to be dedicated and focused to the show. I want this person to be on call. I want him to eat, sleep, and breathe the KMS show. And he found that in Coleman, who has been unbelievably perfect so far. The kid is a natural producer, and he's falling in line with Steve and Dave to the point where I think that he will eventually surpass what they did in terms of what a producer can be. And I think his ideas are next level in terms of improving the show. I think he's got a funny personality. And I also think he's starting to really understand Kirk a little bit more. And on top of that, single guy, moved within walking distance of the studio. And when you hear what goes on in his life, it seems like he's pretty much 90% dedicated to the show. And he's working in the morning from home. At night he's doing stuff. I mean, this kid gets it. Now, when you look at what Kirk said he wanted, Coleman was the perfect fit. Now you look at his other producer, Gus, and to no fault of his life is different. He's a newlywed. He just got married. And anybody who has been married or is married understands that he's in the newlywed phase of his relationship. So obviously he's going to want to spend a lot of time with his wife. He's got other interests going on. He's got this bowling league that he goes to. He does PA announcing. It seems like every weekend he's on some sort of adventure. He lives over an hour away from the studio. So what I felt right off the bat was that Kirk wasn't true to his word when it came to his hiring of producers. He was truthful with Coleman. He was a man of his word there. But when it came to Gus, no, it went against his criteria. And part of the reason why he said he didn't hire John Rich, Mike Montante, John from Scranton, is that they had relationships. They lived out of state. They weren't willing to relocate. I mean, those were deal breakers for him right off the bat. So then all of a sudden, he decides, it's okay for me to hold these guys to a hard line, but I'm just going to let this guy and Gus walk in. That's not right. I mean, you have a guy like Beyond Average Mick, lived down the Cape. Another person who Kirk said, too far. I don't know if you can make the travel every day to the studio. And this kid's like, I'll move. I'll get closer. I'll talk to my girlfriend about it. And even in jest, and obviously nobody wanted him to do it, he was even talking about breaking up with his girlfriend to dedicate himself to the show. Now, obviously, people need to have lives. You can't do this 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And I'm sure Kirk obviously doesn't do that either. But it just seems like Gus is more dedicated to Gus than he is the show. And you're seeing that on the show. You're seeing, hey, Coleman's bringing up a lot of good ideas. Coleman's getting a lot of positive feedback. Coleman's coming up with topics. And then you ask questions of these guys, and Coleman's like, hey, this is what I've done for the show. This is what's going on. This is the idea I have. And you have the other person saying, I went bowling. I did this. I did that. And it's funny because Kirk's a guy who will say, it is about the show. What are we doing for the show? My focus is the show, be it the podcast or the live show. And I'm wondering why he doesn't get after Gus about that. Why is it always about Gus? Big Steve Robinson on a recent episode said, Gus is the me person. And that's something that goes against what Kirk wants. Kirk wants people dedicated to the show. He said that much. And now he's not doing that with Gus. Also, Blind Mike had said Gus needs to find a path. We all agree Gus needs to find a path. But is there a way that Gus can find a path that doesn't relate to Gus? What Gus has going on in his life, Gus's cast of characters. I mean, nobody wants to see the dirty bedroom. Nobody wants to see him cutting the grass. Nobody cares about the bowling league. But for some reason, he thinks that his personal life should be part of the Kirk Minahan show. Now, if it was the Andrew Augustus show, by all means, do what you got to do. So what I'm saying is, I don't think Gus should be fired, but I wonder what happened to the trial period, the honeymoon period on the Kirk Minahan show, where maybe Kirk would say, hey, this is the way I want this done. You have to remember, you're the second producer. Act like it. And I think until he's corralled a bit, and he's really told, hey, you are in the second chair, act like it, I don't think that this kid is going to bring anything positive to the show. And I also think that there is starting to become some friction within the world. Coleman is firing back at him. At a recent Comic-Con, he called Gus his intern. You can kind of see that it's starting to crack a bit, and it's only been a month or two. So what I'm telling you, Kirk, is set the boundaries with this guy. Tell him enough of the me stuff. And also admit, which is hard for you to do, that your rules for hiring Gus were different than for your rules in potentially hiring John Rich, John from Scranton, Mike Montante, Beyond Average Mick. It seems like you had a different criteria for Gus than you did with the other guys. And I know you won't admit it, but the funny thing is, you would go and tell Menners, you're not being consistent, I need an apology. We don't want an apology from you, Kirk. Just to say, hey, I can see your perspective. That's it. Topic number 2. Again, be consistent, Kirk. You have gone after Chris Curtis, Christian Fourier, and other people in the media when they say things that are politically incorrect. For example, Curtis and Mina Kimes. You were all over it. Fourier and Don Yee. You went on your podcast and said, what is going to happen here? And you would be disappointed when it was basically nothing. Maybe a suspension for a day or two, but overall, there wasn't the firing or anything like that. And Kirk, we don't have to get into it, but you also know you've been down that road with Murchison and all that stuff. So what I find very interesting is for a person that's always pointing the finger outwardly, saying Chris Curtis, Christian Fourier, Bob Murchison, all these people have done things that don't make sense, why you would then have a different set of rules for yourself when it comes to making fun of that girl Bree, the inside jokes with Justin, the Trung stuff that everybody internally find funny. I mean, I'm laughing in the car when I'm hearing this. This is like unbelievably funny. But Kirk, you need to practice what you preach. And you've already danced that dance with the likes of Murchison, Shirley Leung, Brian Riccio. Why do you want to dance close to them again? So you hold Chris Curtis to a high standard and say, hey, these are things that Chris shouldn't be saying. But then you go and make these jokes. And you always say, hey, Barstool has my back. And they do. They've been awesome. Dave Portnoy, Erica Nardini. These people have been awesome to you. I'm sure the lawyers and all these people have had your back. This is what you wanted. This is what we wanted. And it's perfect. It's copacetic. It's awesome. But why continue to make the jokes? Why continue to bring up storylines that you know that these people are going to cut and clip and send out there? You've had that happen in the past where Brian Riccio or Bob Murchison incorrectly cut clips to the way that they wanted it and sent them out. And it basically got you and Jerry Callahan gone from WEEI. Why give people that potential? Why give people the ability to use what you're saying as ammunition? I mean, why? Why not just say, hey, I made the jokes about Justin. I, have said some things about Bree or other people, and just say, okay, the joke was funny. People get it. End it. Move on. And it's just, again, be consistent. If you're holding Chris Curtis to a high regard, hold yourself to a high regard. Obviously, you will never say, hey, the rules are different from me. But just don't go pointing fingers at other people when you're doing the same thing yourself. And another thing, you always tell people, hey, this is boring, I don't want to talk about it. This is dumb, I don't want to talk about it. Hey, I think we've over-talked about this. When it comes to Trung or other people or other topics on the show, there has to be a satiation point. There needs to be a stopping point. There needs to be a way for you to be able to listen to the feedback of people and say, hey, maybe we've run the storyline to the ground. And it just seems like you guys are trying to create something in Trung which isn't there. And then when people like Menners or other people on Mike of the Minifans say, hey, I'm bored by this storyline. We heard him on the vlog. There really isn't anything there. We feel like this is going to flame out. Why keep on going? Why not listen to the people that buy your pay-per-view, buy your merchandise, listen to your show? If we're telling you, hey, it was a nice thing, but let's move on, why don't you move on? I mean, I think you kind of got that drift when the Steve Snell thing was going on. It was funny for a week or two. People laughed. We heard him on the show. And then we were like, okay, we're done. Let's move on. And I just feel like you guys are trying to get blood out of the stone when it comes to Trung. There's just nothing there. There's no life to this one. And now we're talking about merchandise, T-shirts, having him on the show, doing a podcast from the bowling alley. I mean, Kirk, do you ever put your finger in the air and take the pulse of the room or look at the room and be like, hey, none of us are really interested in this, and the people that are just appeasing you. Because you mention him or Coleman mentions him or Gus mentions him, then people feel like, okay, we should be able to listen to Kirk when it comes to that stuff. And the problem is, and this is my final point, nobody's allowed to go against the grain. And maybe that's your mentality. Maybe that's the way you were brought up. I was brought up the same way, to never be able to admit, hey, rules are different. But why is it that when other people bring up topics that you find boring, you're able to shut down? But when a lot of your listeners are saying, hey, this thing is boring, this angle, this person, this storyline, you don't have the ability to say, hey, I get it, but I want to continue. That's all we're asking for. Be consistent. Hold the same rules for everybody. You know, you can't point fingers at people and then not expect people to disagree. And when people have different opinions, be able to hear those opinions and say, hey, I get it. I know where you guys are coming from. And the problem is, we'll get the greatest hits. You'll make fun of somebody. You'll make fun of me. Totally fine. No problem. You'll get your peanut gallery to do it on the show. Oh, let's make fun of him. Oh, he's an idiot. Then callers are going to call in and be like, oh, this guy's awful. Or there's going to be posts on Twitter or YouTube. This guy needs to get a life. But instead of doing that, why not just openly say, hey, I get your points. I get what you guys are doing. Maybe we should revisit this. It's what you do in business. You have a business model. You say, hey, we're doing it this way. We're not selling well. How can we make changes? You make changes. You move on. And I think you really need to take inventory of what you have going on. Storylines, your producers, merchandise, and you oftentimes say, I don't care. But Kirk, we know you care. You're the most competitive guy that is a part of Barstool. You care when it comes to trivia. You care when it comes to golf, mini golf, surviving Barstool, or anything that you have going on. Your show, the pay-per-views. You care. So when you have this attitude of like, I don't care, do what you want to do, that's not you. You know, you're a person that saw a small screen in Plymouth. And again, Kirk on the show says, I don't care what you guys do. That's burned you up in Plymouth, and you got rid of Cullinane because of it. So be consistent. You know, you can't behind the scene say, I care about this, I want this to be better, I'm going to make changes. And then on the show you have this, do what you got to do mentality. You say to people like Menners, be consistent. You be consistent. You do what you say you're going to do. You practice what you're going to preach. And if you set guidelines for one producer to get the job, be consistent across the board. And if you say, hey, I want this producer to do something, make sure the other producer does that as well. And give people the opportunity to state the way they feel without having to come onto a show and apologize. And I'm not going to go on to your show. I don't want to. I don't want to go in the third chair. And this isn't a plea to go in the third chair. I don't want to be called during the show. I got a life. I got things going on in my world. So this isn't an angle. This isn't like, oh my God, he wants to be on the show. No. What I want is consistency. Across the board consistency. Do unto others as you would do to yourself. If you say something to one person, make sure you say it to the other person. And there has to be a finality if things don't work out well. If a producer isn't doing well, you have to be able to cut the cord. If a storyline isn't doing well, you need to be able to cut the cord. That's just my feelings. Anyway, episode 1, I don't know what this thing is going to be titled. I don't know if there's going to be an episode 2. But I really hope that this wasn't too much of a manifesto or a rant. And I promise you, if there is an episode 2, it'll be a lot more cheerful. Thanks. Talk to you soon.